The Rebbe came on a Monday. And of course, the Chassidim right away asked the Rebbe if he wanted to speak, and he wanted to fabring, and the Rebbe said, until I speak to the Rebbe the Shver, until I speak to the Frierdiker Rebbe, there's nothing. Ich bin auf der Peklach. And the Rebbe moved with the Rebbetzin into what is now his office. The Rebbe and the Rebbe, they put 2 beds in that room, and that's where they lived, in one room. The Rebbe and the Rebbetzin were quite used to living in one room. They'd been doing it for years, unfortunately. And they moved into one room. They lived there for a few weeks. And then they took an apartment on President in New York, where they lived for probably 15 years or so. And then Merkez bought the Rebbe's house. The Rebbe's house is not the Rebbe's property. The Rebbe's house belongs to Merkez. It belongs to Lubavitch. The house that the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin lived in. So the Rebbe arrived on Monday. And the Frierdiker Rebbe wouldn't see them until Thursday. The Rebbe himself told the story by a Fabring in public. The Rebbe told the story. And the Frierdiker Rebbe wouldn't, can you imagine, the Frierdiker Rebbe knows what's going on in Europe. And he loves his children like a Rebbe loves, like a father loves. And he wouldn't see them for 3 days. The Rebbe explained that the reason the Frierdiker Rebbe did that was he was Poshet worried about his own health. The Rebbe was a very emotional man, the Frierdiker Rebbe was. And he wasn't going to see them until he felt that he was calm enough. So they arrived on Monday, he saw them on Thursday, and they didn't go in as a couple. The Rebbetzin went in alone first to see her father, and they spent some time, and then when the Rebbetzin walked out, the Rebbe walked in and saw the Rebbe privately. So that Thursday night, there was a Fabrengen. You have to see the descriptions. Herschel Fogelman was a bacher. And the Rebbe walks in, and everybody came. And next to him is standing Herschel Schusterman, Rabbi Schusterman from Chicago. He was a big Talmud Chacham. And Herschel Fogelman turns to Herschel Schusterman and says, I don't understand a word. He says, Shasha, neither do I. The Rebbe spoke Torah a ganze Nacht. He spoke on the halacha, the Mishnah, the Gemara, about Sichem Lahedis. That there's 4 people who have to say Goimel, Baruch HaGoimel HaChayovim Tevish B'Antev. Of course, the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he went from prison, said a Maimeh, Baruch HaGoimel HaChayovim Tevish, and he explained, it's not Sh'asali Neis, it's a whole beautiful sugya. But the Rebbe spoke it up in Igle, a whole night verbringt. And it was this a Yid was Gisach Terevi Abrudim. Teire was like marbles. A kid moves a marble from a place to a place. It was an incredible gilui. And of course, the Rebbe was very still, ruhig, calm. There were not a lot of people present at the Fabrengen. There was plenty of empty space. 20, 30, 40 people. How many people do you think there were? And this was an eye-opener to them. They'd never met a man like this. It's so Hasidish, and it's just kol teire kula. Anyway, so there's one story that I need to tell you. The Rebbe lived in this room, right here. And the Rebbe was a Fruma Yid. You know what Fruma Yidden do? They daven in shul with a minyan. Yeah? So the Rebbe had talent film, and he came to shul, he daven. But normally, the way you daven is, you take a talent film, you go to shul, you put in your film, and you daven. But if you live across the hall, there's a halacha that if you live in a neighborhood which is clean, today you can see this in Yerushalayim, you put your talent film on at home. And you walk to shul mu'utar to mu'utar. It's a hidur. It's a better way to do it. In New York City, especially now, I want you to know the last few years, they used to they'd give you a ticket if you used the street as a toilet for your dog. It's become, you can't say Davar Shabbat in the street anymore. When I was a child, the streets were dirty. Then they cleaned it up. $500 fine. People clean. The last few years, it's become terrible again. I'm making an official protest to the mayor of New York City. Everybody hears every word I say in the whole world. I have to stop it. It's not cheretz. Curb your dog. Clean up after your dog. But in Yerushalayim, the streets are clean. You see many people. They put towels home. So the Rebbe did that. He would put towels on in his room. He came to daven. He finished davening, back to his room. But the Rosh Chodesh, you change your towels and tefillin in the middle of davening, because you don't daven musaf in tefillin. But the Rebbe put on 4 pairs of tefillin. So it's not 4 pairs of tefillin. It's 2 pairs of tefillin and 2 extra shalarosh. And there's nine hayem yayim in the Sefer HaMenhagim, what you're supposed to do. To put on 4 pairs of tefillin, you have to have a guf naki b'yesed. It's not for us. It's not for us. You have to have a very, very pure body. The Frierdiker Rebbe said, like in Vierpart film, Guf Nokim, he said, the Rebbe said about himself, I was afraid to do it until the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe told me that I should. A Guf Nokim, a very, very pure body. So you take off the Shalosh of Rashi, and you keep the Shalyad of Rashi, you put in the Shalosh of Shemush Rabba, or what they call Shemush Rabba of Rashi, and you do certain things. It says in what you're supposed to do. Then you take off the Shalosh of Shemush Rabba, and you take off the Shalyad of Rashi, you put them away. Then you take out the Rabbeinu Tam film, you put them on, and you do what you have to do with the Rabbeinu Tam film. Then you take off the Shalosh of Rabbeinu Tam, and you put on what's called Ravid, or they call Shemush Rabba of Rabbeinu Tam. So Wednesday and Thursday was Rosh Chodesh. Chav Ches Sivan was Monday, like it is this year, same Kviyas. This year Chav Ches Sivan is Monday. That when the Rebbe arrived 81 years ago was the same arrangement of days. So Rosh Chodesh is Wednesday and Thursday. So the Rebbe came to shul with 1,000 tefillin. In other words, the Rebbe expected, I'm going to do my thing, everybody else is going to do their thing, and who's going to look at me? Well, the whole shul was looking at him. Especially when they realized that he was playing around with the tefillin, you know. Even if the Rebbe had just put Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi, like most people, I mean, you have to remember, in 1941, Baruch Ham didn't wear, Baruch Ham only wore Rashi tefillin. The whole business of Rabbeinu Tam is a chiddush of the Rebbe, and it started slowly. But the young kids didn't wear Rabbeinu Tam tefillin. But here they see the Rebbe take off one shalosh, put on a different shalosh, then take off the whole thing, then put on the Rabbeinu Tam, take off the shalosh, put on a different shalosh. So they were ogling the Rebbe. That was the last time the Rebbe did it in public. You know, with the Tzelt HaMaaseh with the Rebbe Marash, forgive me for digressing, that it was a Rosh Chodesh, and he was in shul with his talis and film, and he put his talis over his head, so no one should see what he's doing. And he took off the shalosh of Rashi, he put on the shalosh of Shemush Rabba. So some Chacham, it wasn't the Rebbe yet, his father was the Rebbe, it's Tzemach Tzedek. Some Chacham wanted to see what he was doing under the talis, so he poked his head, he see the Rebbe taking off one shalosh and putting on. So the Rebbe took his, he pinched him on the nose. It's a story, maybe it says even who the chassid was, but this is a story that people tell. So there was an old chassid in 770 on that Wednesday, Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, in 1941, 81 years ago this week. His name was Rabbi David Shifrin. Yisrael Gordon talks about him. Rabbi David Shifrin was a chassid of the Rebbe Maharash. He came to America many years before. He was a Chassidish Yid, he was a Freilich Yid. He was the secretary of Agudas Chassidi Chabad. He was in touch with tens of thousands of Geza Anash. Tens of thousands of Geza Anash in the 20s and the 30s. Unfortunately, where are those Geza Anash? Where's the Geza of those Geza Anash? Where are they? The Eibishter is Atem to look to Echad Beis Yisrael, have to take each one of them and bring them to the Eibishter. But anyway, the David Shifrin also watched the Rebbe take off that film and put on that film, take off that film. And you could just imagine how einfach it was, how ordinary it was, how plain. There was no, it was very, very quick. I mean, the way that we know the Rebbe, very quick, very efficient, very without airs, but very precise, you know? And David Shifrin watched the Rebbe, the Ramash, as he was called then, from a distance, take off one shalosh, put another shalosh, take off the Rashi film, put in the Tam film, take off another shalosh, put another shalosh. And he turned to the Bachrim on the spot. And he said, Kinderlach, das is the emes schede. Kinderlach, this is the real schede. Children, this is it. This is what the child of a Rebbe looks like, you know. Das is the emes schede. This is the real wares. The word schede means material for sale. This is, he watched it, that's all he did. He watched it, take off his film, put on film, no speeches. It was before the Fabrengen. Kinderlach, das is the emes schede. This is a story. Anyway, we don't have shurim every day, so I have to crunch into Sunday whatever I can from the whole week, so I'm sharing this with you. Rabbi said we're learning Tanya, and we're holding the second half of chapter 21, the second half of Perek Chav Aleph, which means in the printed Tanyas, it's Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, page 53. No, Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, yeah, that's page 53. Rabbi say, I want to present the shir, I want to introduce it. Of course, throughout the Tanya, you're in the middle of a conversation, right? From the time you start learning the first Perek, you're in the middle of a conversation. But the conversation is broken up into pieces, into subsections. Yeah? The Tanya can be divided into 4 parts. I'm talking about the Sefer Shalbein in it. 4 parts or 5 parts. The first 17 parakim, the next 8 parakim, the next 8 prakim after that, and then the remaining 18 or 19 prakim. You can divide the Tanya into chatives, into shtikalach. We're in the middle of what amounts to the second section of the Tanya, the second section of the Sefer Shel Beinanim, which we're calling the short way, not the long short way, the short way. If I cannot be a Beinani through Moyach Shalt Al Alev, which is a very involved avodah of hisbonenus, and avavayire, use my mind to arouse my heart. So the Alter Rebbe is giving us another technique, which takes him 8 prakim, from chapter 18 till 25, and we're right in the middle, holding chapter 21. What's the technique in a sentence or in a word? I've said this many times, and I find that a lot of people misunderstand the pshat and the Tanya. This technique is not meditation. It's not contemplation. It's visualization. It's the picture, to imagine. And it's a lot easier to imagine than to study and to use your seichel. What you're imagining is not so pleasant, but it's not intellectual. It's a fantasy. It's imagination. And what you're imagining is the inyan of Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem. The Yetzer Hara bothers you. Maskira Layei Mamisa, the Gemara says, you think about Mesiras Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem, the idea that Yidden have given their lives for the Eibishter and for Achas Hashem, and it gives you a koyach to fight with the Yetzer Hara, and then, according to the Alter Rebbe, in your day-to-day life, not just in special moments, in your Chaye HaYoim Yoim, in your day-to-day life, the remembering of Mesiras Nefesh gives you a koyach to fight with the Yetzer Hara. But it takes him 8 prakar to make that point. Now, I just said it in 8 words. Why does it take 8 prakar to make that point? Because the Alter Rebbe has to argue it. He has to prove it to you. Alter Rebbe is going to prove to you how you can use the inyan of Mesiras Nefesh, which is usually associated with Avodah Zarah, which is one extreme sin, in your chaya yem yem, in your daily life, for every mitzvah and every avodah. The way he presents it is by making a very powerful argument. And the argument is every mitzvah is Achas Hashem and every avodah is Avodah Zarah. That's his position. Every single mitzvah is a statement of the unity of God, and every single avodah is a declaration of the lack of unity, which is the same thing as Avodah Zarah. And that takes him time. That takes him time. Alter Rebbe needs to develop for us a thesis. It's actually scholarly. Some of the hardest prakim in Tanya are in the section of the Tanya to teach to the person who doesn't have a brain, He's developing a position. He's arguing how every mitzvah is equal to Achas Hashem and every avodah is equal to Avodah Zarah. How does he do it? He does it in 2 big steps. Number 1, he introduces you to Achas Hashem versus Avodah Zarah, which is chapters 20, 21, and 22. And we're right in the middle of that. We are right in the middle of that. Number 2, he repeats it again. Achas Hashem is connected to mitzvahs and Torah, and the opposite of Achas Hashem is connected to Avedis and Avodah Zarah, and that's chapters 23 and 24. I'm going to repeat what I just said a second time, okay? In chapters 20, 21, and 22, that's 3 prakim. That's 3 prakim. He introduces you to the theory of Achdas Hashem, the unity of God, and the theory of the opposite of that, which is Hashem is not a balabais Avodah Zarah. Then he has 2 more prakim, 23 and 24. In 23, he connects Achdas Hashem to mitzvahs and to Torah. And in 24, he connects Avodah Zarah to Avedis and to Avodah Zarah. That's how the structure is. And in chapter 25, he makes his point. Chapter 25 is the Pedic of Mesiras Nefesh. I told this to you before, that the Rebbe's father wrote the Rebbe, our Rebbe, a letter, that the day of his wedding, you should learn chapter 25 in Tanya. Because Pedic of Hey in Tanya is the Pedic of Mesiras Nefesh, B'chai Hayem Yoim. The chapter in Tanya, which speaks the idea that a person has the power of Mesiras Nefesh in every day, not just in extreme moments, is chapter 25. And the Rebbe's father uses an expression which is so interesting. He says, Tilmeid b'yem achas in Tanya Sefer Shabbat Pedic of Hey, Bekavona avoloi be'iyun. You speak Hebrew. Learn it with your heart and not with your mind. Learn it with kavona. Don't study it. Don't intellectualize it. I know you're a smart guy. Bekavona avoloi be'iyun. Do not study the Pedic. Just let the Pedic talk to you. The heart. Because the Rebbe's father was telling the Rebbe an instruction which was negate his avodah, Paltiel, in his daily life. So Rabbi said, we're in the middle of a conversation. Where are we holding exactly? We had a Pedic and a half, which is for us a bunch of classes, I don't know how many classes, which explored Achdus Hashem. We started in chapter 20, and we continued it in chapter 21. We are now at the moment of transition. Chapter 20 and the first half of 21 explained Achdus Hashem. And again, if you came to these classes, you know. The first Achdus Hashem is the world is like nothing. And the second Achdus Hashem, the world is literally nothing. Because when Hashem spoke to create the worlds, He didn't really speak. If you were here in the last few weeks, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now we change. The Chaf and the first half of Chaf Aleph were climbing up the ladder from a lower level to a higher level in Achdus Hashem. Now we're going to be climbing down the ladder. We're going to the opposite point of view. Okay? And the opposite point of view, to say it as Hasidim would say it, that Hasidim Verbringen, says da Welt. Right? You ever heard the question? You can't win this question. Because it's a religious question. It's not just a philosophical question. Is there a world or is there no world? Now, if there's a world, you got a problem with Achdus. If there's no world, you got a problem with Teda Mitzvahs and Chava. Make up your mind. Do I exist? If I don't exist, why do I have to keep Shabbos? If I do exist, what do you mean that there's only God? And it's got to be worked out. And this is one of the brain twisters that keeps Chabad Hasidim chronically curled up into a pretzel position. Because this is the Maimonim talk about this. Many Maimonim talked to this question. Yeah, world, no. But for those of you who read the Maimonim in English, in the Hasidic Heritage series, this is Micha Moicha. The Reb Marash Micha Moicha, that's the issue of that Maimon. That Achdus Hashem says there isn't a world. Teda and Mitzvahs and Teda says there is a world. And he tries to present us both sides of the coin, that there isn't a world and there is a world. And by the way, when you're done with that Maimon, you first begin with the trouble. It's not like you walk away, oh, now I understand. No, now I know what the question is, you understand. But the Rabbeim have been exploring this for a very long time. And of course the answer is, to the Eibishter there's no world, and to us there is a world. But that's of course not a good answer, because if the Eibishter there's no world, to us there is a world, so to us we're doing Teda and Mitzvahs, and to him we're doing nothing, so what did we exactly do? What I want to explain to you is that there's these 2 points of view. From the Eibishter's perspective, there's nothing. From our perspective, there's something. But there's 2 somethings. When you say that from the perspective of a person there's a world, there's 2 somethings. The first something is true to the Eibishter as well. It's called godliness. Hashem created godliness. Godliness, like everything else, is shalei kipshuta. It only exists in the space of the tzimtzum. But it's true. You understand? Godliness is true. And the second is that there's sheker, that there's klippa. So from when you say that from Hashem's point of view, there's nothing. But from the creation's point of view, there is something. You must appreciate that there's 2 levels to that something. The higher level of that something is the something is Ein Sof, Atzilus, godliness. That even though to the Eibishter it also doesn't exist, but in as much as godliness exists, godliness is truth. It's an expression of Hashem. It's Vekes in the Eibishter. And then there's Klippa. Klippa is a lie. Kuli Shek, it doesn't exist at all, except in our imaginings. And that's how this is developed. By the way, I just want to throw in Derech Hagav. The Rebbe has a sikha in Sharichat Ramuna, where he talks about it's a very nuanced sikha. It's a very important sikha, but the Rebbe is picking on words. In chapter 3 and in chapter 10 of Sharichat Ramuna, the Alter Rebbe discusses the same thing, how the world is one with Hashem, but he uses different words. And what the Rebbe explains in the sikha is that the difference between chapter 3 and chapter 10 is that in chapter 10 he's talking about how godliness exists in God. And in chapter 3 he's talking about how the world exists in God. And the difference is godliness is true. Elokus is emes. Even though in the presence of Hashem, Hashemliness is altogether bottled, but in as much as Elokus exists, it's emes, it's truth. Klipa sheker. And that's what's going to be developing right now. Okay, if you've sort of held on to what I've said, I haven't said anything particularly profound. Is until now, chapter 20 and 21, we presented a thesis on Achdus, how there's nothing but Hashem. From now, we're going to be presenting a thesis on, as they say in the middle of Chassidische Verbringen, Welt, there is a world. But it's going to be presented in 2 steps. The first step is worlds that are godliness. That even though Lagabi the Eibishter they don't exist, but whatever they are is true. That's going to be the end of this Perek till the end of chapter 21, We don't have much left to learn in terms of commas. It's just a few lines. The Alter Rebbe is going to argue how godly worlds exist to us, even though to the Eibush they don't exist. Then there's going to be the entire chapter 22, where the Alter Rebbe is going to discuss Klippa. Okay? So this is where we're at. We're now stopping the discussion on Achdus, which says there is no world, and we're beginning the discussion on Metzius, on there is a world, which is our perspective, and it's broken up into two pieces. The end of chapter 21 is going to speak how there is a world where the worlds are Elokus, godliness, and in the next page we're going to be talking about Klippa and Avodah Zarah and all those other things which are the basis for the nisyonos that we face in our lives. Go ahead.
You said something about marbles or being marbles.
No, the Rebbe stated being like marbles. Children play with marbles, right? You have 10 marbles, yeah? You move them around. Imagine the whole Torah being like 10 marbles and playing with it like that. That's how the Rebbe teaches. He knows it so well. He owns it so thoroughly that it's effortless. And he moves the pieces around in a million different configurations. The Rebbe's contribution to Torah will not be known for hundreds of years. And this is a man who was busy saving the Jewish nation from the Holocaust. And at the same time, he managed to give us, it's not just so much, it's so original, it's so different. And one of the critical components of the Rebbe's contribution is this absolute insistence that Torah is one. There's no Kabbalah, Nigle, there's one Torah. And every word that came out of his mouth made that case. So when I say moving around the pieces, a Gemara with a Kabbalah, with a Zayah, with a Maimeh, with a little philosophy, but it works. It's emes. You understand? It's not just interesting, it's also true. Because the Rebbe is a Balabas. The Rebbe once said to somebody, Teira is a Rebbe nit shver. That for a Rebbe, Teira is easy. It's a gift. Teira is a Rebbe. The Rebbe said about himself. Teira is a Rebbe nit shver. The Rebbe asked for a Gemara. And they brought him the Rebbe was standing. It was a big, heavy Gemara. And the Rebbe took it. So one of the Elder Chassidim wanted to help the Rebbe. The Rebbe was holding a big Gemara. He could have put it down on the table, but the Rebbe held it. And the Rebbe told him, Teira is a Rebbe nit shver. For a Rebbe, Teira is not difficult. That's what the Rebbe said. Shall we? Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Is it like your full day lunch level?
The answer to your question is absolutely yes. We are learning now Shara Yichad V'Emunah Peidik Zayin, right? And Chitas. And everyone is very excited about the second half of the Peidik. The second half of the Peidik, Shara Yichad V'Emunah, since V'hinei Mikan, this is where the Alter Rebbe introduces his machlokes with the Misnagdim about Tzimtzum Shaleiki Pshutei. And somebody just sent me a copy of Rabbi Miller's Tanya. It's a fact. The Alter Rebbe didn't print it. When Alter Rebbe published the Tanya, the whole piece about Tzimtzum, he didn't publish because the Alter Rebbe did not want to agitate the Misnagdim. 103 years after the Tanya was published the first time, the Rebbe Rashab added it in Tafresh Samach in 1900. For 103 years, the Tanya was the second half of our chapter 7 was missing. Because this is where the Alter Rebbe directly confronts an issue of theology that the Chassidim and Misnagdim had about Achdus Hashem and Eibishter and Makam HaKlippa and so on. But here's the thing that I need to tell you. The first half of chapter 7 of Shara Yichad V'Emunah is a shtickle Yossi. He's a little bit orphaned. Because everyone's so excited about the second half that they forget to learn the first half. And the first half of Shara Yichad V'Emunah is incredibly important. It's very important. It's very important because it answers the question, which is the title of the entire Shara Yichad V'Emunah. If you look at the first page of Shara Yichad V'Emunah, there's 2 lines. Lahavin ma'at mezeir ma'chakosa b'zeir. The Shema Yisrael Yichud Elo Baruch Shem Kaved Malchus Al Eilavad Yichud Etatz. 2 lines. I want to explain a little bit what the Zohar means when it says that Shema Yisrael Yichud Elo and Baruch Shem Yichud Etatz. And the answer to that question is in the first 2 pages of Peidik Zayin of Shara Yichad V'Emunah. What does the Alter Rebbe answer? Alter Rebbe answers that Eibishter wants a world. He needs a world. You know why? Because he wants Torah mitzvahs. So Achdus Hashem has another side. On the one hand, Ein Mavadi, that's easy. There's only God. Fine, I get it. But on the other hand, no. He wants that there should be a world, and he wants that there should be a person, and he wants that he should have free will, and he wants that he should serve him, and that's why the Eibishter creates Yichud Etatah. So Yehuda Tato is not just for the meek of heart. You know, why do you say Baruch Shem? What do you mean? I can't say. When I say Hashem Echad, I don't mean it. So I say Baruch Shem Kived Mechuz Leilam. But I mean it. To say I don't exist is not true. I think I exist. But to say that Hashem is my master, I can handle that, right? But the Alter Rebbe says there's another reason. Ana Emlech. Hashem wants us to step away from the perspective which says we don't exist to a perspective where we do exist and we serve Him because He needs us. You know, the Alter Rebbe told the Ruzhin Rebbe. The Ruzhin Rebbe was a child, and he said to the Alter Rebbe, if a person says Hashem Elokei Hashem Echad, how could you say V'ahavta? If you don't exist, how could you love God? The Alter Rebbe said, that's why you say Baruch Shem. You don't say Baruch Shem because some people are not holding by Yichud Ilah. The Eibishter needs a Yichud Tato. He needs that we should exist. And now you got the whole message. So next time you ask a question, you have to be afraid of how this Meshuggah is going to react to the question. But no questions on that. So somebody else had a hand raised. But talk loud.
Okay. To that point where like we do matter to Hashem, like Hashem needs us type of thing.
Yeah.
Is that from our perspective or from Hashem's perspective? You said
From Hashem's.
but
It's Torah, it's Emes.
Hashem's perspective, we don't exist.
From Hashem's perspective as far as Hashem is concerned. But not from Hashem's perspective as far as what Hashem wants. We don't use the word need. You're not allowed to say need. You're not allowed to say Hashem needs. Because saying Hashem needs means Hashem has a lack. He wants. Now if you have no need, why do you want? And the only answer is it's not a logical want. It's not a logic says when I need something I want it. If I don't need anything, what do I want? The Eibush called the Rotzen Atzmi, we call it. The Eibush has a will that we should serve Him. We should make a deal with Yisbarach b'tachtonim. It's not a logical will because He has no chesreinis. He doesn't need it. We need to eat. If I don't eat, I'm hungry. The Eibush is not hungry, but He has a will that we should serve Him. And from that perspective, He cares about what we do. It's Negea. That's the whole Kabbalah, the whole Chassidus. We touch Him. Before Chassidus, before Kabbalah, it's all for us. He doesn't care one bit.
Doesn't that make Hashem far away and distant and not relevant?
It's the other way. It's the other way. Because Ma'isa Tachtenim Negea, what we do matters. That brings Him close. That's the whole Pnimius HaTorah makes the Eibishter close to us. Without Kabbalah, without Chassidus, nothing we do matters to Him. And we have no relationship with Him. We only have a relationship with our own possibility. Hashem, if you ask Misnagdim why the Eibishter create the world, they'll take you Chafetz Chesed. They didn't make it up. It says in Sifrei Mut, it says in Rambam. Hashem is kind. And He created the world so we should be able to do something to better ourselves. And to Him it makes no difference. But Kabbalah and Chassidus says, no, it makes a difference.
Why does it make a difference? Because Hashem does need.
No, because He wants.
Hashem doesn't need.
Hashem wants.
We're making Hashem distant.
How?
Because we make Him, He doesn't care.
Oh, He cares very much. But I stand by what I said. Metod nicht sagen, er darf. Man darf sagen, er will. And it's really no different. It's only different when you think about the Eibishter as a bubbler, as someone with emotions. So then you say, you're talking about Atzmos and Muslims al-Baruch. You're talking about the Eibishter. He's not your grandmother or my grandmother. He's the Eibishter. He's God. When He says, I want, He means it. And He never changes His mind. Even if He has no need for it. That's one thing about the Eibishter. He's an Atzmi. He doesn't have moods. He doesn't wake up tomorrow and change his mind. We do that. Whether we understand it or not, He says, I want. And it's more than enough. It's more than enough. But okay, psychologically, the word need creates a certain kind of an intimacy that I appreciate that. But I just think it's wrong. It's as simple as that. But okay, Gesundheit. Hiluch HaShalach. Okay. Okay, now Rabbi say. So we're hovering at a moment of transition. What's a transition? Until now, the entire perspective was Eided Mavad. It's only the Eibishter. Now begin the perspective that there is. So let me show you what I'm holding. Okay, I'm on page 53b. Daf Chof Zayin Omid Aleph, 6 lines from the top of the page, beginning of the line. Okay, please open up your Tanyas. We're on page Chof Zayin, on page 53. 6 lines top of the page, and I'm reading the text. It says the Rebbe ve'ein shum shinoi klal afanav yizbarach. As far as the Eibush is concerned, there's no change whatsoever. Before the Eibush created the world, and yet the Shem Leishanisi, there was only God. Now that the Eibush created the world, there's only God. There is zero difference. What, from his perspective? Diba Shalaikim Pshutei, Simsum Shalaikim Pshutei. We had 3 classes on this, I think. Now comes the key words. El Abruim. But there is a difference to us. The creations, us, who were created in the language of this Pedic, by the words of Hashem, right? In later Prakim he speaks about the light of Hashem. But in here he speaks about the words of Hashem. To us there is a difference. Before Hashem spoke, we were part of his thought. We were called Ayin, we were called Ephes. And when the Eibishter spoke and he brought us forward, we became Yesh. And in our experience, that's a real change. Now we exist. And in some way, shape, or form, we have our own self-identity, which means, in other words, in some way, shape, or form, we're Kfayachol, separate from him. So let's read the words inside. Okay, now start from the beginning again. If you knew what God knows, from the Eibishter's point of view, there's no change in creation at all. Ella, except El Habruim, to the creations, and we are the creations, Hamekablim Chayusam, who receive their life. Mibechinas dibure Yizbarach, for the Eibishter's words. Bebechinas Yitzayose Kvad, inasmuch as the words of Hashem, so to speak, emerge. Kvad, Kvad literally means already. El Apoil, into actualization. Bebrias Ha'elam is in creating the worlds. In other words, whenever we use anthropomorphic form, whenever we use a mashal, we're describing the Eibishter in a way that sounds like a person. We're doing this to give us an ability to understand it. That's why we're doing it. We're doing it to give us a... So when you say, Hashem spoke that things should come into being, this means that before they were part of his thought, and now they're emerging from a state of thought into a state of speech. What's the difference? When you think, everything is inside your mind, and when you speak, it goes out of your mouth into the environment outside of you, where you are not, right? In what's called the Mokem, the so-called space of creation. So from the perspective of the creations, when Hashem speaks, something changed. Before he spoke, we were one with his thought, with him. And after he speaks, we have emerged from him, so to speak, to be our own self-identity, separate from him. Okay? Says the Rebbe, Shemislabesh bohem, that when the Eibishter speaks us into being, the most important thing he's doing is separating. Right? He's separating. We were a part of him, and now we're apart from him. Right? We were a part of him, and now we're apart. We're separated from him. But the nature of our being apart is that he sustains us, that he gives his words, that on the one hand make us separate from him, also carry the light and the life and the energy, which invests itself within us, to give us life, al yedei hishtalshalus, through the chain reaction of worlds, mi'ila la'olul, from cause to effect, v'yeridas hamadregis, and the descent through the steps, in many and various different types of contractions, of diminutions, of making it less, to create the worlds on the various different levels, until sheyuchlu habruim, that each creation in its world, in its level, and in its form should be able to lekabel, to receive chayosam, their neshama, their life, v'hisavusam, their guf, their creation, mimena, from Hashem, in such a way that v'lo is battle of a we shouldn't be bottled in our form. In other words, we shouldn't feel like since we're one with Hashem, we're nothing. To the contrary, since Hashem invested himself in us according to our limitations, we exist. Okay? So let's talk about these few lines. This is the process of creation. So I just want to add something. I mean, we've been learning this for a while. I just want to add one little idea which I didn't mention. That when you learn about the differences between thought and speech, the difference that we talked about is when you think, the words are in your mind. When you speak, the words emerge from you. But there are other differences as well. When you think in images, in pictures. So many words are in one conglomerate. In other words, on the level of thought, the whole creation is one. And it says, Maimari Chasidis, that this is called the Maimer Echad. It says in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, B'asarim Amaris Nivra Elam, Hashem created the world with 10 utterances. And then it says Hashem could have created the world with Maimer Echad, with one utterance. So you have this in Ranat, in one of the Hemshechim of Ranat, that, and the Frierdiker repeats it, that before the Eibishter created the world with 10 utterances, he created it with one utterance. And this is called the Shabbos, which is before Sunday, you know. Shabbos comes after the 6 days of the week, but there was a Shabbos before that Sunday. The Shabbos before that Sunday, the world exists as part of Hashem's thought, in Olam HaMachshava. And in that thought, the whole creation is one maimed, is one utterance, it's one. So the difference between speech and thought is two things. Number one, when you think, it's in your mind. When you speak, it travels out of your mouth into the environment where you are not. And number two, when you speak, you can only say one word at a time. So it creates diversity, division. One creation, a second creation, a third creation. But when you think, you can think everything at once. So although you're thinking about many things, but you're thinking them as part of a unity, so the differences between them are not manifest. So we describe creation. Hashem first thought. Before he thought, we call it Ephes. After he thought, we call it Ayin. And after he speaks, we call it Yesh. Ayin is the Mokar Yesh. Ayin means what the Eibishter is planning to create the world, but hasn't created it yet. So the world exists in an Ayin state. And then there's an emergence from the Ayin to the Yesh. So the Alter Rebbe says, let's put Achdus Hashem aside for a moment. Let's leave it. Let's speak about our perspective. And our perspective, you see, is Torah. Our perspective is not just what we perceive. Our perspective matters to Hashem because the Eibishter has an interest in the creation. So Torah also says, Vayomer Elokim. Torah doesn't lie. When Torah says Hashem spoke and the world came into being, even though we are saying from the Achdus Hashem point of view that Dibur is Shalei Kipshutei, there's another point of view that has legitimacy also. And like I told you before, the hardest dilemma is how they could both be true at the same time, in the same place, in the same creation. And that's a fact. They are both true. There is complete Achdus and the world exists all at once. But from our point of view, Hashem spoke and he separated us from himself. He separated, right? Speech means the words which were inside me, I radiate out of me. But when I radiate those words out of me, I put my air, the air from my lungs and my heart into those words. But they're tempered. They're measured, right? This is the simple example. It says in Chumash that the neshama was created by being blown. And it says in Tanya that when a person blows, all the air in his lungs come out. Yeah? Try this. Try to speak words and blow at the same time. Let all the air of your lungs, or as Chassidus says it, all the air of your heart emerge and speak. What's going to come out? Maybe a raw sound that we call the sound of the shofar. Maybe a raw sound. Kol pnima de'ishtama. It's even possible there won't be any sound at all, which is kol pnima de lo ishtama. But there's not going to be any words, and there's certainly not going to be any organization. There's certainly not going to be any coherency. You can't do it. When the Eibishter created a neshama, he spoke and blew at the same time. The Eibishter has a couple of tricks up his sleeve that we don't got. You understand? So one of the criteria of speech is there has to be air. It just cannot be sounds alone. It needs to have amplification. It needs to have koyach, or we call the Tanya chayes. But it's tempered. When you're very excited, yeah, you ran a marathon, and your respiration is very, very, your cardiovascular system is in overdrive, and you can't get words out. I ran 50 miles. Yeah, the words don't come out. Because in order for the words to come out orderly, one and then another, you have to control the air, which is called tzimtzum. You're diminishing it. You blow only such a certain amount of air on your vocal cords to produce a certain type of a sound. If it's going to be too much, it's not going to work. If it's going to be too little, it has to match. That effort in matching up what you're saying with the oxygen, with the air, which in Chassidus is called the hevel halev, not hevel hareya. They don't call the air the lungs, they call the air of the heart. However we explain that physically, has to be measured. That's a mashal for tzimtzum. When Hashem speaks us, He's projecting us, so to speak, figuratively speaking, out of himself into a space, into a makom where here is not. You could sit here. You can sit here. If somebody wishes, you can say, you just can't sit here. Unfortunately, and a lot of other respiratory illnesses, Rahman al-Islam. So there's a tzimtzum component. Al Rebbe says when Hashem spoke to us, He said it. Oh yeah, we're outside of Him. And the nature of our side of Him has several points. Number one, we're separate from Him. Number two, He's invested in us. He didn't just push us out and say, go shvim. He's invested in us. And number three, the investment is proportionate. The investment is tailored to us, not to Him. So the Eibishter, we call it in Tanya, Slapshus, Keach, Apel, Benifel. The Eibishter invests the power of the Creator in the creation. He didn't just make us. He sustains us by giving us life. Or to say what I just said in other words, and now I'm going to repeat myself again. There's 3 steps to creation, not 2. The first step is thought. Thought means the whole creation exists. It says in Zohar, and this is Zohar. In one thought, the Eibush created everything. There's another maimer, but I don't know if it's Zohar. The moment Hashem willed, there's that word will again. Everything came into being in an instant, but the everything existed as a part of Him. And then He spoke. What does speak means? He pushes the creation from inside of Him to outside of Him. Now you all understand how terribly difficult that is to say, because Hashem doesn't exist in space. And He's certainly not excluded from one space over another. But the only way to understand Tzimtzum is to imagine space. You have no option. And that's the whole Shalei Kipshutei. The Shalei Kipshutei number 1 is that there is no Makom. And the Shalei Kipshutei number 2 is that wherever the Makom is, Leis Asad, Padi Midei. If there is Asad, if there is Makom, He is there. But we're not talking that perspective. We're speaking the perspective that He's created space and He's projected creation, so to speak, into a place where He is not. That's speech. But that's not enough. To push us out of Him, maybe it does Him a favor, it doesn't do us a favor. There's a third step, which is compared with called Diburish ala Kadosh Baruch Hu Chashav Ma'aseh. How the words of Hashem are considered a deed. He reinvests Himself. In Kabbalah we call it the Kav, the measured line of godliness. The rule, the measure, the limit of godliness, which Hashem reinvests to give us sustenance every second. So it's not just that He removes Himself and leaves us over and says, take care of yourself. He removes Himself, leaves us over, and continues to sustain us. That continuous sustaining is a separate step. It's the second speech. There's Dibur, there's Tzimtzum, Hashem removes Himself for the world to exist. And then there's Dibur Chashav Ma'aseh, Hashem's speech is like a deed, which is called Hislapshus, Koyach, Apel, Benifal. Hashem does not create the world through a negative action. Tzimtzum is a negative action. Removing yourself from a situation is not proactive, it's not helping. It's helping yourself. Hashem removes Himself. And He leaves over the creation, but then He reinvests Himself. But when He reinvests Himself, He doesn't reinvest Himself as He is. He reinvests Himself as the world can receive Him. You understand? And that's, so to speak, the third step. There's Machshava, the world, how it's one with Him. Dibur, how He removes Himself and leaves the world. And then Diburish ala Kadosh Baruch Hu Chashav Ma'aseh, Hashem's speech is like action, where He gives chayas to each of us on our levels. And this is called Tzimtzumim of Seder Ishtalsel. Hashem created many worlds. What separates one world from another is how much of Him is invested in those worlds. Even though Achnas Hashem says none of this is real, but we're not speaking Achnas Hashem, we're speaking Ala Makabla Meiri Yisbarach. Our point of view. From our point of view, not only He created us by separating us from Him, He creates us by sustaining us with life that's proportionate to our ability to receive. Go ahead. The Kav has many tzimtzums. First of all, the Tzimtzum Arishan has a huge effect on the Kav. The way it's described in Kabbalah, and please don't ask me to explain it, is it's a Bekiyah. The Kav is not invited, you understand? The Tzimtzum cleanses all the earth, and the Kav breaks through the Tzimtzum. And because it breaks through the Tzimtzum, the friction of the Tzimtzum's resistance and the Kav breaking through makes the Oida Kav it's much different than the Ein Sof before. than the Ein Sof, which is before the Tzimtzum. This is number one. And then in each world, the Kav adapts. The Kav is a ruler. Meaning, the Kav creates the worlds, and the Kav sustains the worlds, and the Kav delivers the Kelim. The Kav does everything. But the one of the components of the Kav is to create separation between a world and a world, to have the Kelim of that world emerge, to be an entity unto themselves, and then to invest of its light into those Kelim according to those Kelim. So the Kav acts as the Eibishter's Hashgacha Pratis, they call it. The Misnagdim call it Hashgacha Pratis. The Rebbe says it's not enough. But the Vilna Gaon was not he believed in Hashgacha Pratis. They believed that the investment of Hashem and the Hel Tzimtzum is Kipshutei. The investment of Hashem in the world is through the Kav alone. Mashgiach. And we don't want to think that that's enough. But we agree with him, but he says we just hold more. The Kav is the Eibishter's representation in the creation where he manages it. And he limits how much he invests of what the Kav is to the creations of the world to be able to receive it. You follow? I think I'm going to stop. Ahmed, I was planning to teach much more. I must tell you. Please come again. I'm not going to be the next 2 weeks, but it's so delightful to see everybody here. Okay, we're going to do Hayom Yom in a minute.